Let's go! It's gonna be a football game tonight now. No doubt. It's gonna be a football game here. Okay. I done been here before. All right, let's go, baby.
9. Rushing 4, ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, and it's still on the ground. Picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
Alabama back on top of the college football world.
Ladies and gentlemen, football to the max.
Your host, Sean Garmer, Gary Vaughn, and Randy Isbell.
Hello and welcome to another Football to the Max. And we are all about the NFC South on this edition of the podcast. I am your host, Sean Garmer, and here with me, of course, the guys that, they make me look pretty here, doing all the work. Randy Isbell and Gary Vaughn, how you guys doing?
I didn't know this was a fashion show.
I know, man. I feel like I need to get on the runway more often. But that's okay.
That would be amazing. Gary on the runway.
Hey, Zoolander was based on me, so that's fine.
See, I knew Gary had the fashion in him. There you go.
Exactly. Of course, when your wife watches all those Heidi Klum fashion shows, you kind of get used to it, I guess. But anyway. I'm excited, guys. This is football season. We're finally getting into the first week of preseason.
I know. 1 month from now, guys. 1 month from now. Sunday.
Yeah, but see, you're underselling the actual good part about it. These preseason games. I love preseason. You guys may hate it. I love preseason. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I love the regular season, but man, I'm telling you guys, preseason is full of great gems. You get to find those guys that are on the third team and they're finally making it their own when it comes to these preseason games. I love those hidden gems.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of storylines that are going to be fished out here as far as who's going to make the team, who's going to become a starter, those feel-good stories that we're going to see all month. But we're also, Gary, going to see a lot of overreacting. As all three of us are fantasy players, you're going to see that one guy go completely ballistic in one preseason game and move up 5 rounds in the draft. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how those kind of work. I've seen some highlights from the first couple preseason games, and I'm excited to sit down and actually watch them in full. But I am ready. Football's so close as far as the full-on version. Preseason's good enough for me right now. It's almost here.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, normally I don't give a rat's ass about the preseason, but having the Game Pass, being able to sit there and sit down and go, man, I want to watch these, and I can, and that's going to be so much fun. And we're starting it early. Last year we waited till the start of the season. This year we are not. We're starting our. I don't think have we announced this. I don't think we have actually announced this. So for this season, because we've actually gone through and previewed almost all the college conferences, and we will be doing the Big 12 on the Monday or the Tuesday show, sorry. And then we'll be doing the SEC at the last show of the whole, before we get to the actual covering the college games. So that's the last 2 of the power conferences we haven't done, and we got a couple of the smaller conferences we still have to do. But we're going to separate college and NFL this year and actually give college some due. We're going to cover it a little bit more. We're going to give it a little bit more respect than we did last year, where it was like Randy doing a segment that was like the last 10 minutes of the show, and it was always felt like we're just kind of handing it off to him at the end, and I almost felt like we're just doing Randy a disservice, and we're also doing the college game a disservice as well. So we're going to have more games that we're going to give predictions for, not just the 10 that are on the ESPN Pick'em thing that we're doing. We're going to have a top 25 that we're going to discuss every Monday, discuss through and then have a 10-minute convo about that and make our top 25, have a game of the week that we're going to talk about. And then, we all kind of flip channels on Saturday. And we're going to have fun just saying, hey, I watched this. What did you guys get to watch it? Or, hey, here's what I thought for about a minute or two. It's not going to be anything like overly, totally crazy like what we do with the NFL. But I still feel like it's at least something, and we're giving it some due in some respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And, last year I was proud of myself. I think I converted Gary a bit more onto the college game. I remember many Saturday nights where Gary would be messaging me on Facebook about some random Pac-12 game that he all of a sudden was hooked into. So I'm going to continue to convert Gary into a super college football nerd, and he's going to be watching football from 9 a.m. on Saturday till late Monday night with me, and it's going to be great.
Oh, yeah, and Randy's not lying about that, and I am super excited about this college season more than I've ever been. I told somebody the other day, and they were kind of shocked, like, you watch college? And yeah, I watch college football now, and I love it. So I'm thrilled about it. I'm really into it already, and I know the Saturday games are the big highlights, and trust me, I get why. But you don't know until you get to those Saturday night games what's out there. I just love even those small little games that no one cares about. I'm deep into them, so it's going to be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, we should all be excited. We should be happy about the football coming fast and quick. And, Gary was telling me when I was trying to pitch this thing to these guys, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, they're going to yell at me about more work, And Gary's like, I don't know if I want to be watching games. This game I don't care about. It's like, you watch when we start doing this and you get more into it, you're going to be sitting there watching a game that you never thought you cared about watching until you go, oh man, I watched this game and now I can talk about it when we do the top 25 or whatever. And you're going to be excited. You're going to be excited to watch that game, Gary. You're going to catch yourself.
I'm sure. I don't doubt it. I really feel like I am going to be getting into games I never would have thought. It happened last year. I'm sure it'll happen this year.
Too bad they don't have a college fantasy, or we would all be stuck in that. Right?
I know. Oof, that'd be tough, though. Think about all those players.
But that being said, what you saw us do during the regular season, if you listened then, if you're not a new listener, we're going to take all these NFL games that haven't done in the preseason, and we're going to sort of, in a way, break them down, talk about, what we liked, maybe some people that stood out and everything. And, yeah, so we'll give you a whole month early of what we do during the regular season. Maybe when the games don't matter, we get to have a little more fun, not be so serious. But, it's still a work in progress. Hopefully by the time we get to that regular season, we'll have it down to a science, and we'll have it all down, and we can do this in an hour. But we'll see how that goes. But aside from that announcement, like I said, NFC South here today. We're all about making sure these things kind of stand by themselves, so we're gonna get right into it. The longest one will air here first, about 25 minutes with all of these guys are last word on sports writers, actually. First time we've ever had that, so that's pretty cool. Honored to be able to say we did that. And the longest one here with Will Cotchery, last word on sports writer for the New Orleans Saints. It's about 25 minutes to everything else being around the 14, 15 minute mark after that. So Will Cotchery talking New Orleans Saints. Hello, and I'm here with last word on sports writer for the New Orleans Saints, Will Cotchery. How are you doing, sir?
Doing all right, good. I'm doing all right, man. It's good to see you. Good to hear from you again. I'm excited to be back on the show.
Well, today starts the Saints preseason. You
Absolutely.
excited about this? Ready to watch the game and everything?
Oh, yeah, I've been excited. Been waiting for several months for it. It's been like 2 back-to-back disappointing seasons, failing to make the playoffs after making it in the 2013 season. We have some very talented draft picks from this season and also last year, if you can include them as well. We're playing the Patriots, just a model franchise in the history of sports. We're going, they took the trip this last year down to New Orleans. Now we go up there for finish the home and home series in Foxborough. So I'm really eager to see what we have to offer. What the players been. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of camp in terms of especially the defensive side. I know Drew will be limited. They want to keep him just fresh for the season. So I'm just eager to see where the backup quarterback situation goes, and especially on the defensive side as well.
I mean, before we get into the team that you have now, there's a certain former Saint that retired this week, Lance Moore. I mean, it seems like everybody had great things to say about him. Do you have memories of Lance?
Oh yeah, he was one of my favorite players throughout the years. He really came on like in the second or third season, around the 2008 season when I first personally started paying attention to him. Just like the famous first down gestures, he was just a very fun guy to watch on the field. Very consistent, very reliable target for Drew Brees, especially on more of a possession type receiver with his quick feet, especially on the inside routes. He is sorely missed. He's like around the top 7 in the multiple receiving categories in Saints history after Marcus Colston and Joe Horn and some of those Saints greats as well. So it was, it was sad to see him go when he left out of the 2014 season, but I know it's a business at the end of the day. So, it was great to hear he didn't ultimately sign with the Falcons, just like that rivalry thing. But
right.
Just going back to the question, it was a great career. It was a pleasure to see him.
So looking at the way the team was constructed in the offseason, you mentioned the draft a little bit too. Do you like what they did? I mean, they went and got Sheldon Rankins, which seemed to be the guy that was pegged for them from the beginning. They trade up to get Michael Thomas. They trade up to get another Ohio State guy. I mean, do you like what was done there?
Yeah, overall, at first when the draft occurred, I gave him like an average grade. I honestly gave him around like a 6.5, 7, just because obviously the first pick, Sheldon Rankins, I was really pleased with what they accomplished there. I think it was just a short thing. It was just obvious. It was like a foregone conclusion for me, in my opinion. I just feel like he was just a dominant player at Louisville. We need somebody just to clog up the middle and blow up plays behind the line of scrimmage, and even in certain scenarios, even create a pass rush. But after the draft happened, I was looking at the rest of the draft. It was some question marks at first, especially with Michael Thomas. I actually had a receiver as a distant need in the later round. They actually picked out Michael Thomas in the second round. So I actually have him. That was like one of my surprise, like the head scratches for me here last where, we do our annual draft reviews, and we do it based on like superlatives. So the best player, the head scratcher, the surprise, the steal, the most likely to turn heads and cancer, and just the rest of the draft picks. That's how we analyze our draft reviews every year. And I actually had Michael Thomas in the head scratcher, like I said, the head scratcher region. Although he was just a very talented player, I also had him as a surprise pick as well. Just even though he's a talented player, he was very overshadowed by Ezekiel Elliott and Braxton Miller during his days at Ohio State. But even though he's a talented player, I actually didn't expect him to pick a receiver so early. But based on his frame at 6'3", 209 pounds, he's going to be the next Marcus Colston for this franchise. And based on what he's been doing in training camp, I've been hearing a lot of great things about him making plays all over the field on the receiving end. I think, they landed this one. So I was pleasantly surprised about his progress, his quick progress so far. Obviously, he wanted to translate onto the field. But I'm just, so far, I'm pleased from what I'm hearing. Now, we drafted a guy, Daniel Onimata, the D tackle from Canada, who hasn't had much experience of playing the football game altogether in his lifetime. That was another interesting player as well. The most player I was disappointed that they picked was Daniel Lasco from California. Although he's shown on film from his college days, he is very talented when it comes to making cuts, quick cuts. all over the field, and he can cut a field with explosion. I just felt like we were at that position. We were already stacked with Mark Ingram and guys like C.J. Spiller, stuff of that nature. But not to question his talent. I just feel like they could have went somewhere else with that. But looking back on everything, based on what I've been hearing in camp, I think we'll be in good shape.
I mean, speaking of, you mentioned the running back core. I mean, having a Cadet, Hightower, Ingram, you have a John Kuhn at fullback, and you got two.
Right.
I mean, do you think Mark Ingram will do what he did last year, and do you think this might be the year finally you get to see C.J. Spiller do what you signed him for?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, Saints traditionally run when it comes to their running game, we run a running back by committee. So it's not like, like the Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, bell cow type system, which is fine with me because you get guys to really get rest up. But then again, based on his Alabama days for Mark Ingram, he was the man. He was the guy running the ball for that program. And that's how he won the Heisman Trophy back in 2009. Once he got to New Orleans, obviously, you got questions about the scheme fit, but I was really impressed with him in his progress from his first few years in the NFL. So, because he made a Pro Bowl selection in 2014, although he didn't make 1,000 yards, I think he had like 964, which is not bad for anybody in any program at all. And when you talk about C.J. Spiller, the question's always been, can he stay healthy? And I feel like if he can stay healthy, he can provide the Reggie Bush or the Darren Sproles type role. Maybe not be as fast as he once was, especially in his college days. He was one of my favorite players at Clemson when he was at his best when he was in his younger days. One of the better all-purpose players I've ever seen. I'm just really eager to see what we have in the backfield this season.
I mean, last year you had your trio of wide receivers that were really sort of under the radar, and especially Willie Snead kind of came on and became this star for them. Now you add a Michael Thomas. How does he fit into that scheme?
Well, right. Well, earlier, like I said, essentially, especially based on what scouts have said, based on what I've seen on film in his days at Ohio State, Michael Thomas will be essentially the guy who will be like the Marcus Colston 2.0, really a guy who can get up the field, not with speed all the time, but he can really surprise you with his cut and his route running ability, and he can really go up and get the ball, which is somebody they need because what the success with Drew's had, like he doesn't mind the tall guy, as you can say with Jimmy Graham in the middle at 6'7" when he was here. But I think he will fit. I think he'll be a seamless fit as long as he learns schemes, especially how the defense will cover him. I think he'll be in good shape, like you said, with the other receivers. Brandon Cooks, after his rookie season, during his rookie season, he was leading all rookies in catches before he got injured and missed the rest of the season. Last year, he had, I want to say 9 touchdowns and 84 catches, if I remember the stats correctly. But he was really productive in year 2. And like you said, Willie Snead really came up under the radar as well, especially. He was just a pleasant surprise for our team last year, although obviously we didn't make the playoffs and we had some struggles early on the offensive side of the ball. He was one of the bright spots as well. He actually made our website's NFC South all division team. He was as a slot receiver. So I was really pleased with what he did on the field last year. So I think, especially when the game started going, especially in the preseason, you can also tell there. I think there's going to be a great success for them this season.
This year you bring in, he's not an obviously replacement for Jimmy Graham, but he's a guy that's been consistent. He already had a lot of experience under Andrew Luck and the Colts and Kobe Fleener. Are they going to try to use him in the same way that they did Jimmy Graham, or is there another spot for him here?
I feel like, when we use Kobe Fleener, I think it's going to be slightly similar to Jimmy Graham. Obviously, he might not have the same physical traits. At 6'7", it's like slightly different size. But I feel like, we really flourish in the tight end friendly. We really flourish with a tight end who can catch the ball over the field. So it may not be at the same clip like with Jimmy Graham because he did catch 99 passes. Like he was always consistent with the 80-plus range. I don't know if I don't know if Kobe Fleener would get there. I think around 50 to 60 range, especially in year one. I feel like that's a fair number with him, especially when you have guys like Willie Snead, who's going to be just another year older, another year wiser. Michael Thomas is a talented outside receiver at 6'3". I think, of course, Brandon Cooks, with the speedster. I think those guys are going to get the touches more so. I think it would, I personally feel like 50, 60 catches wouldn't be a bad season. It wouldn't be a disappointment for me out of Kobe Fleener.
I mean, you were mentioning that you're excited about the defense now. Where do you see that they have improved over last year that makes you go, man, I really am excited for this defense as opposed to what we had last year?
Well, there was a lot of reports about, Rob Ryan, brother, just being too complex with the defense. It just depends. A lot of times it just really depends on the player. I think there was a lot of guys who were just maybe tired of they just wanted something different in terms of the defensive scheme. I've been hearing about, especially on film as well, I've seen Von Bell. He was actually, when I did the draft review for the team, he was a steal of the draft because of his versatility. I always praised Kenny Vaccaro in the past because of his hitting ability and his ability to play coverage around the field as well. I think you can see glimpses of Kenny Vaccaro in Von Bell. And about going back to Sheldon Rankins, of course, at the defensive line, he actually picked off Tom Brady in the practice a day or two ago. So, and it was funny because when he was interviewed about it, it didn't really hit him until the reporters told him about it. So obviously, that's something to brag about somewhat. But obviously, what I love about him, he was just so focused and he's ready to move on to the next play as well. There's a lot of, the main thing that really excites me is just the youth of the team. Delvin Breaux last year was another huge surprise. Per se, probably the biggest surprise on defense because considering they were so poor statistically, historically especially, because he really had his coming out party, so to speak, against Atlanta on Thursday night when he handled Julio Jones. That's what got a lot of critics around the league talking about him. He was actually, at one point, he was like a top 5 cornerback in Pro Football Focus's analytics system. I think he finished in the top 10, like 8 maybe. I don't remember the number exactly. But it really shows, what was really impressive was that, this is his first year in the league after playing like some time in Canada in the Canadian Football League. So like I said, the overall theme really is just the youth. I know we have James Laurinaitis who can really give some better leadership, and another huge pickup was Roman Harper as a safety coming back to the team. We really need that veteran leadership as well. But, at the end of the day, we want our young guys to really get the reps and get the time on the field, get the experience so they can take charge of this defense moving forward.
All right, so looking ahead now to this season that is, about a month away,
Yep.
I mean, how do you feel about your schedule, who you're playing? What are your expectations for the team?
Oh, man, it's really tough because, I love, the progress these young guys are making, really our team is making. Stuff that obviously is always tough to really predict, records and stuff. But we also conducted a series in terms of each team's most easiest games, the 8 most easier games, and the 8 most difficult games. And I'm gonna just run it down for you if you don't mind. I ranked the 8 most difficult games that we have this season. The first 2 are the games we have versus the Panthers. Number 1 toughest is at Panthers. Second is versus Panthers, and then we have a game. Number 3 is versus the Broncos. And what was the unique thing about the Broncos? Obviously, they're not only the Super Bowl champions, but we played them on a Sunday, even though that's at home. But after that game, 4 days later, we go to Carolina and play Carolina in Charlotte. So I think we're gonna have a work cut out for us because we also play Seattle and Arizona, and we open the season against the Raiders at home, nonetheless. But still, that's obviously, as you know, that's one of the more exciting young teams as well. Based on what they've done last year, especially in the draft the last couple of years. And then the 8 toughest, I have the Giants because of that crazy shootout last year in the Dome. I said in my report, I was saying that I jokingly said that both teams will combine for over 200 points this time around, but because of just the scoring bunches. But it's going to be an interesting schedule. right now, if I had to give you a record, maybe 9-7. That's just being super optimistic right now, because it really is a challenging schedule, especially if we have an early bye week. So, and I'm not personally not a fan of early bye weeks for my team, but I think best case scenario right now, I guess, would be a 9-7.
All right. I mean, looking at the rest of your division, obviously you've got your Super Bowl runner-up in this division, and you've got a Tampa Bay team that looks to be improving, and you've got the Falcons as well, who are no slouches themselves. I mean, when you look at the Saints compared to this division, I mean, it's rough, right?
Yeah, as always, one thing about the NFC South, never disappoints, in my opinion, I know I'm sound biased because I'm a fan of it also. Up until Carolina a couple of years ago, no team since the 2002 realignment had ever won the division in back-to-back seasons. Like I said, up until Carolina the last 3 seasons now. So I feel like right now I think Carolina is really in prime position to complete the unprecedented four-peat of the division. I feel like they're just the most complete teams on both sides of the ball. They had the number one scoring offense last year, and we already know about their defense. Luke Kuechly, my personal favorite defensive player in the league right now. Just seeing how he controls the defense, makes sideline-to-sideline tackles. He's actually probably the best coverage linebacker in the game as well. He's a very rangy player who can really take the ball away from offenses. When you look at, even though they lost Josh Norman and obviously Roman Harper in the secondary, they said their strength of the defense comes from the front seven, and they really kept that intact for the most part. So I don't think there's going to be too much fall off, honestly. When you look at Atlanta, obviously they have one of the more talented offenses in the game. Matt Ryan, of course, the veteran quarterback and leader of that franchise. And you got Devontae Freeman, a Pro Bowl running back last season, probably the most versatile back in the division right now. And, of course, Julio Jones, that goes without saying, arguably the best receiver in the game. And they have, probably arguably the best tackle tandem in the division when you have Jake Matthews on one side and Ryan Schrader on the other side. Ryan Schrader was actually my player who I put on the division's all-division team. So, because I just love how he played against the pass and the run, and he was Pro Football Focus, one of their top right tackles in the game as well. When you now the defense needs work, obviously, even though they signed Dwight Freeney, I think they still need more than that. So I want to see how the defense plays. When you look at Tampa Bay, obviously you have Jameis Winston at quarterback, Mike Evans and Mitch Jackson on the outside, and Austin Seferian-Jenkins, if he can stay healthy, that's another weapon they have to their disposal. And, of course, Doug Martin, the muscle hamster himself, returned to his rookie Pro Bowl form in 2012, because when he's healthy as well, he's a dominant force in the rushing attack. Now, for the defense, outside of Gerald McCoy, the usual big-name players for them, Gerald McCoy on the defensive line and Levante David at the linebacker spot. Outside of that, that's kind of shaky traditionally. So I want to see if those guys can come together. I think they have Brent Grimes now, if I'm not mistaken. So if he could come in and play like he did in his Miami days, I think their secondary will be in better shape. So once again, the division, playing against those divisional foes will be a huge challenge, and it always is. So we won't take them lightly. So I'm just excited till the season starts.
All right, so you think Panthers are repeating. You got the Saints at 9-7. Where do you see the other two in the?
I think even though Tampa Bay, they'll have Vincent Jackson coming back healthy, and hopefully Austin Seferian-Jenkins will come back healthy for their sake. I still think they're really a 5-11, 6-10 team. Because Jameis Winston still, even though he made the Pro Bowl as an alternate last season, I feel like he still has more to learn as a quarterback, just to learn how to be a professional at the game, learn how to be a savant in his craft, so to speak. So I feel like, and of course, their defense, I still think that needs work on, especially in the secondary spot. And Atlanta, the same way. I know they got off to a strong start last year. They might be, best case scenario, I think they're still an 8-8 team, maybe a 7-9 team at best. I just feel like they just fell off the wagon last season. because also because of their defense as well. When they went to the NFC title game in 2012, they had a Pro Bowl safety tandem in Thomas Deku and William Moore, and that was a huge part of their success, especially on the defensive side. But they haven't had that since then. So I just want to see how they respond on defense this year. I know they've drafted a safety, but it is interesting to see how he does in his first year, because they're going to need him to play big in his career.
So you have the Saints being in second, then you think that they get to the playoffs with that 9-7?
Honestly, I'm gonna just say at the moment I'm gonna say no. I feel like the NFC conference as a whole is just too strong. I feel like throughout the other divisions, I don't have records for those guys yet. I feel like Seattle, Arizona will make it once again, and really just I think Green Bay will be back in the division. And Minnesota still has a strong chance to be yet another wild card team again. And as far as the NFC East is concerned, I still think that the Redskins will slightly pull it out, even though Tony Romo expects to come back healthy. I feel like, Washington has more talent on offense. So I feel like they'll come out of that division as well. I just feel like it's too tough for the Saints to come in. Because it's really going to come down to their defense. And if they really come together, they don't have to be the elite defense. They don't have to be the 2013 Seahawks, the 2000 Ravens, those two Bucks. They don't have to be at that level. But just in the middle of the road, I'll be satisfied with that, because that's a win.
All right, you gave me a best case scenario. What do you think is the worst that you see the Saints doing?
Worst case scenario will be around 5-11. I can also see that as well, depending on because it's one thing, like I said earlier, it's one thing to get it all together, have momentum in training camp and practice, but if you don't do it in the regular season, let alone in the preseason when you have those available reps to you at your disposal, your dreams are not going to come into fruition like you want to. So I think the worst case scenario would be just the defense will not live up to expectations. Offense will once again start off slow, because that's been the biggest strength of our team in the last decade. So if they start off slow once again, the defense is going to put the defense in a much more difficult position, especially with these road games. So worst case scenario would probably be 5-11.
You talked about Drew Brees being limited earlier. I mean, what are you talking about when you say he's limited? Are we not going to see the Drew Brees we've seen?
Oh, I wasn't. Well, technically, I wasn't implying just about for health reasons, because I know a lot of critics out there, he's going to fall off. But it's tough to see a guy fall off when he has, 4,000 or 5,000 career passing seasons. He only had like 4,700 at least last season. I don't see his play dropping off, but I just, they just want to see what they have in Garrett Grayson, the backup quarterback, because a lot of people they've been criticizing him as well. Because I'm not a fan of critics, criticizing guys who just played one season or just was on the roster for 1 year. And that goes to the same thing as Andrews Pete, the tackle out of Stanford from last year's draft. It's just not enough time for me to really decide what the career of a player is going to be. Now, Jadeveon Clowney, I know this is slightly off topic based on division and team, but Jadeveon Clowney, that's a different scenario. Not just because he was the number one pick in the 2014 draft, but he's going into year 3. So, it's really time for him to step up. Same thing with Jarvis Jones, the linebacker out of Pittsburgh. It's time for him to step up. In year 3, year 4, it's just your time to really take the next step. Just to be a competent starter. So just, Greg Grayson and, Andrew Speed only going into year 2, it's just way too early just to really make a case on their careers. So that's why I'm just eager to see them in preseason. I'm just excited to see them, how they respond to that criticism.
All right, Will, you answered all of our questions here. So I want to thank you for helping us out.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the first time when we talked about the draft. It was a dream come true. It was a blast. I'm here to do it more with you.
Oh, man. I gotta love when you put your microphone on mute and forget that it's on mute. Yeah, that was last word on Sports Writer, Will Cotchery, talking about New Orleans Saints. I think most of all, he kind of had a pretty realistic view of the Saints. When you hear some of the other guys talk about them, they don't necessarily discuss them in a more favorable light as you'll hear Will do here, but they certainly have and this is something we're going to talk about at every team here. They have the pieces. They have things that if everybody stays healthy, they can move in this division. It's just, it's hard to see with the Panthers being so good and everybody else in the division is no slouch either. I mean, what do you guys think Saints-wise here?
I'm actually kind of optimistic as he is. I know that they had a rough season last year, and people are just kind of giving up on the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era, but I think they still have a little bit gas to them. I don't think they're going to contend with Carolina. I don't think they're on that level, and neither did he. But I think that they could battle for that last wild card spot in the NFC if things worked out a little bit. Watching a little bit of the highlights today, obviously the big news came with Michael Thomas, who looked really good. Again, I'm not going to overreact to a preseason game where Drew Brees threw one pass. But he's definitely looking like he could find a good spot, in the offense. And we'll just kind of go from there. They added some nice pieces in spots that they really needed it, kind of bolstered that defense a little bit. And again, where he had him, that 9-7 range is not unthinkable, I don't think.
I think that, you, Randy, you make a lot of sense here, and I think he does too. I don't know if I'm so optimistic. Now, I think that they're not going to be a bad team. I don't think they're going to be a team like they were last year where they were just kind of almost, I hate to say it, but a joke in a way, because you just were hampered by injuries, hampered by the fact that just nothing was really working their way last year. I, still like their offense, of course. It's hard not to love an offense that has Drew Brees at the helm. I mean, no matter who else is on the field, he's kind of like a Tom Brady. He makes everybody else better. So leave that alone. The defense did get a little bit better. I'm still not sold that they're complete yet. I'm not sold that they're going to gel right away, which I think that could cause them to lose some games early that they may later in the season not have lost if they had the defense gel right together right away. So I could see that being a problem. 9-7 is not a bad record, but I'm not so ready to put them even in the playoffs, or maybe not even in the 9-7 just yet.
The thing with the Saints is they definitely did get better defensively. Sheldon Rankins adds a lot to that. And the defensive line is actually pretty stacked when you look at it, just on on paper. And then some of the guys that they sort of have in reserve there. I mean, your linebacker core is there. I mean, he talked about the defensive backs getting better. So the defense as a whole, and then you have a different system. You don't have Rob Ryan making things complicated. You never know. It could step up. Preseason is nothing you can judge, so you have to wait till you get to the regular season. Some guys they're just gamers and they don't practice well, so you have to wait for that end. I mean, I think it's all going to come down again to Drew Brees, though, and mostly can he outscore guys? And they definitely have the weapons around him again this time for the Saints to do that, as they have done. But when it gets down to those points in the season, you're playing these teams where they do have the better defenses and they shut Drew Brees down for a couple of drives. What do the Saints do then? And those are the games that they might lose, and it might be where they don't do as well. I don't think a 9-7 is outreachable or unreachable. I think that wouldn't be bad for them. In fact, I would say 8-8, 9-7 wouldn't be a bad record for them at all. A team that we're going to probably talk about last, I think that they might actually have a better shot of possibly kind of going up in the rankings here to be that number 2 team more than the Saints. But it's so hard because you can never really count them out, because right when you say, okay, they're going to go down this year, Drew Brees pulls it out of a hat and they're winning more games than you thought. Anything else you want to say about the Saints before we move on here?
No, I think we kind of, gave our opinions about him. I mean, I don't want people to think I'm trying to hate on him. I think that this defense definitely is improved. I just know the way this league works, and just because you have the pieces in place where you need them doesn't always mean it all works in the right order. So that's my biggest concern.
Well, speaking of teams that have pieces in place, they went all the way to the Super Bowl last year and lost. We're talking about the Carolina Panthers, and I have Last Word on Sports writer Garrett Readling doing the honors here. Let's see what he has to say about the team. All right, I am here with Garrett Readling, Last Word on Sports writer for the Carolina Panthers. How are you doing today?
Doing great. How about you?
Doing all right. So, Garrett, has the Panthers always been your team, or is that something you
Oh,
picked
yeah.
up later?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've actually been a fan since I was born. We've owned PSLs up at the stadium since, like, 95, so it's always been kind of a thing at my house.
Alrighty. I mean, so, the team did wonderfully last year. I mean, making all the way to Super Bowl, unfortunately, losing. But, I mean, this year, they didn't really have to do a whole lot, let's say, in free agency or the draft to change things, but they did lose a big piece of their team in Josh Norman, so they kind of spent the draft taking about 2 or 3 corners and along with Vernon
hmm
Butler and a few guys. Did you like what they did in the draft? Do you think that they maybe spent too much on corner there?
Well, the thing is, what I was thinking is, I don't think that we were supposed to be nearly as good as last year. Like I think they were a year ahead of schedule in rebuilding, and just hit their marks and did really well unexpectedly. And I think this year is the year they were really supposed to break out even more. Does that make sense?
Right.
And I like that they keep their depth at defensive tackle. You can never have too many defensive tackles, and that's the Dave Gettleman style. And and so he's always got big guys coming in there, and I really like Daryl Worley, who he took in the third round, and Bradbury, especially, who he took in the second round. But I think Worley is going to end up being better physically than Bradbury. Now, one worry is Sanchez. I think he's a little undersized, and from what I've heard from training camp, I think he's struggling with the nickel position a lot, like learning the system. But overall, I'm happy with our draft picks because I don't think one player makes a team, and I think the Panthers do a good job of showing that. I think that, they would have liked to have Josh Norman back, would have loved to have him back, great player, but I don't think they'd break the bank to keep him and hurt spreading the wealth elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, it was, you had to, I could see the Panthers wanting to make sure he proves another year before they just give him that big money.
Exactly. Yep.
So, the Panthers start the preseason in about an hour.
Yeah.
Are you, are you
very
excited
excited
about the game and just seeing them start? Anything you're looking forward to as far as players or anything?
I am thrilled. I can't wait to see the wide receiver battles because, the Panthers usually only keep about 5 receivers, and there's a real tight race for that 5th receiver spot and maybe even 4th. I don't know. But I'm anxious to see how Jeremy Cash does from Duke, the undrafted free agent, and along with obviously the corners, all these new guys, seeing how they perform and stuff. I'm just excited. And the running backs too, Brandon Wager and Artis Payne, see how they translate to this year as opposed to last year. But yeah, it's going to be awesome.
I mean, so Carolina, Cam Newton became a huge deal last season with the way that he was able to just lead that team and everything that they did. I mean, is there any higher that Cam Newton can go?
Yeah, I think the sky's the limit with him, if I'm being honest. Because when the Panthers first drafted him in 2011, they weren't a great team. That's why they were able to get him at first overall. And I think that him coming from a spread system in college, he had to learn a lot. In the NFL, he had a lot of growing pains. And then he had that ankle injury since college. He finally got that fixed in 2014. And last year was his first fully healthy season. And I think not having Kelvin Benjamin made him a much better passer because he was able to spread the ball around a lot to different guys.
Well, speaking of Kelvin Benjamin, you get him back this season.
Oh, yeah.
Saying that hopefully he stays healthy and everything. Coming into the season, now with Kelvin Benjamin, how does this change the offense?
Well, you've got wide receiver 1 who's like 6'6", and Kelvin Benjamin, 6'5", and you've got Devin Funchess, across from him, wide receiver 2, like 6'4", and then you got the speed demon Billy Brown or Ted Ginn, interchangeable, in the slot usually, and you've got a bowling ball of a running back and Jonathan Stewart. I think this offense is going to be unbelievable this year. And I hope that I'm right.
So obviously, the defense is still stacked at all the positions they were sort of last year.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they're obviously a little bit weaker without Josh Norman. Has the team sort of addressed how they're going to handle having to plug in somebody else for Norman not being there?
Yeah, I think that I think some of the defensive players like Luke Kuechly, for instance, mentioned that the guys in the front seven, work hard, get sacks, get pressure, and it makes the secondary's job easier, And he just said, we're just going to have to help out the young guys a little bit, get a little more pressure, just work hard until the rookies, fill in. Obviously you don't have a Josh Norman back there, but, these rookies look like they're going to be pretty good players, and so you just have to help them out by doing all you can up there on the front so that they don't have to work as hard on the back end, Yeah.
So looking at your schedule coming into this year, obviously going to be very hard to try to top, which, the 15-1 from last year regular season wise.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Looking at what you got in front of you, you obviously got Super Bowl rematch, first game, and then, you got your division, which is always interesting, and you got quite a few interesting teams you have to play in this schedule. What do you think about it? What do you expect?
I think best case scenario, I think we go 12-4, and that's because they were a fantastic team last year, and I think that the ball bounced our way a lot of times, and helped us kind of win some real close games. And we've got a lot of tough games this year. I'd love to see them win more than 12 games. That'd be incredible, but 12-4, I think is best case scenario for them, especially playing, the Broncos. We got to play the Vikings, the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers are better than they were last season. They're making leaps and bounds, and I believe we play the Raiders too, and they're supposed to be pretty good this year too. It's just a tough schedule. It's going to be very hard.
Yeah. So what do you think would be the worst you see them doing then?
I'm concerned about the Broncos rematch, first of all, because, even in the Super Bowl, the defense dominated that game, the Broncos defense. And I know Mark Sanchez might not be the best guy for the job at quarterback, but, you really don't need a superstar back there if you've got the defense pummeling the offense on the other side of the ball, Like the Broncos defense doing the work for them, keeping the Panthers off the field. But I'm also very concerned about the Vikings, which is a little underrated. I think their offense is going to be phenomenal, and they're very, very lethal and fast. You've got Stephon Diggs. Now you've got Laquan Treadwell, and then you've got, obviously Adrian Peterson, you've got Teddy Bridgewater coming in, and, he's getting better year by year. They're going to be very, very good this year. And their defense is great, too. It's going to be a very tough matchup.
I mean, so you discussed a little bit about Tampa Bay, but what do you think about the division in general just coming into this year? I mean, Atlanta kind of brought back some players they used to have, brought in some new players. Tampa Bay is a 1 year stronger, 1 year older for Jameis Winston and for that team. And the Saints are the Saints, with Drew Brees still there and some additions offensive and defensive wise. What do you see with this division?
Well, the NFC South is always sort of a toss-up usually, and I think the Buccaneers are the closest team to the Panthers in the NFC South. They've got, they're making gains on defense. They've got, Vernon Hargreaves, in the draft this year, and they got the best, one of the best front fours in football and on defense. You've got Doug Martin back there. You've got Mike Evans out wide. And I think Jameis Winston made very, very good development last season. He seemed like by the end of the year he was a much better quarterback than he was at the beginning of the year. Got over his rookie growing pains pretty quick. I think he's going to be pretty good this year. Something to worry about. I think the Falcons are always kind of dangerous. Last season, they got blown out in Carolina first game, and then the second game they beat us by a little bit. It's just the division games are always so hard to predict because they're such a rivalry. But what's his name on the Falcons? Beasley is always a problem. Last year in the second game, whenever they ended up beating the Panthers, Beasley just wreaked havoc on the right tackle position. It was always in our backfield. And so that's always something to watch out for. And they address problems on defense, so there's something to worry about. But I know it's a little bit of a bold thing to say, but I don't think the Saints are going to be a problem for anyone this season. They just don't have a lot of cap room to work with. They've got an aging quarterback, and they got Roman Harper back, but I think their shining point on their team is Cooks out wide. But if you can't keep the defense out of the backfield, you can't get the guy the ball. I don't see them doing that great this season.
So where do you see the teams ranking then, 1 to 4?
Panthers first in the division. Buccaneers not far behind. Falcons not far behind, and the Saints dead last, not even close.
You have the Bucs making the playoffs?
They have a chance to make it as a wild card, yeah, but I'm not sure they're quite there yet. There's a lot of teams in the NFC there that are maybe better than them, because I can see the Packers winning their division and the Vikings making that wild card spot, so that would make it harder for the Buccaneers to make it, because I think the Vikings are better than the Buccaneers, but they could definitely make a run at the playoffs in the wild card spot.
All right. I mean, the only other question I guess I had was with Jonathan Stewart. We saw him get hurt last year, and we kind of saw Cameron Artis-Payne sort of come on and be able to relieve him. Of course, it helps that Cam Newton also was sort of like almost a second running back there. Are they going to kind of continue the committee approach, or is this Jonathan Stewart?
I think it's still Jonathan Stewart's show. Unless he goes down, then maybe it'll be a committee. But Cameron Artis-Payne is a great running back, but he's going to have to make a little more development to be trusted with the ball, because he did have a lot of fumbles whenever he had touches last season. You've always got Mike Tolbert that can come in and do work. I think there's actually a battle for a roster spot between Artis-Payne and Brandon Wager. And so that could be something to watch out for, to see whichever one of them might make it. Could be a future feature back, but this season I think it's still Jonathan Stewart's show as long as he's healthy.
All right, Garrett, you've answered all of our questions here, so I want to say thank you for helping us out, man.
No problem. I appreciate it.
All right, that was Garrett Readling, last one of the sports writer for the Carolina Panthers. And, you know, I mean, with the Panthers, they only get better, right, in Kelvin Benjamin. I mean, yes, you're going to have the issue of Josh Norman not being there. But I still think there's nothing that tells me they're not winning this division.
Yeah, I mean, they are the most complete out of this entire division. I mean, I think that's why they are the favorites at this moment. And, you know, there is a lot of truth to what he said, you know, and I think a lot of people are kind of agreeing. Yes, Josh Norman was a great player, definitely a big asset on that defense, but that front seven gives so many teams problems. It really makes up for what they lost when they lost Norman. It really does. And so I think effectively this year they will be able to still be very dominant and take care of business. I don't think they're going to really miss too much of a beat. Saying that, you know, they just got better on offense. Kelvin Benjamin's back. That makes it even more scary. I just think that they're ready, and you know, they've got something to prove. You know, if they've got to the Super Bowl, I think they're going to be even more motivated now to go further. They want to win the Super Bowl. So I can understand where people would say, well, there's Super Bowl slumps. You know, guys, you know, teams go to Super Bowls, sometimes all of a sudden fall off the map. I just don't see it out of this team. I think this team is strong as ever.
Yeah, this team has something to prove. I mean, everyone was doubters all last year, even though they go 15-1. It seemed like everyone rejoiced when they lost in the Super Bowl. I know Cam Newton is mad because ESPN came out with their tier of quarterbacks and he wasn't in the top tier. And like Gary said, the offense just got better. Kelvin Benjamin is there. Ted Ginn Jr. is no longer the number one wide receiver. Yes, they lose Josh Norman, but as Gary also said, the front seven is great, and I think you can cover for a little bit less talent in the quarterback position with the pressure that they bring. And I just love the enthusiasm that they play with and how high energy they are. Again, watching some of the highlights from the first full day of preseason games, Cam Newton got flagged for running onto the field after an interception return because he was so excited and they had to bring the play back. It would have been a big deal in a regular season, but in a preseason, you know, he was just hyped for his teammates and was having a good time. And I like the energy that they bring. And yes, I can't say I see another 15-1 season, but I can't see them losing more than 3 or 4 really this year.
I mean, this division does have a hard schedule, period. So that's something that you got to consider. It's possible they could dip a little bit more. But it's just, I just don't see if one of the other teams are even close to the Panthers, like by more than a couple games, I'll be surprised just because they're so good. Cam Newton's only going to get better with Kelvin Benjamin, and we saw what Kelvin Benjamin did in his first year. Just, you know, it seems like they're set to be those perennial guys that are getting back to the playoffs, getting back to at least the conference championship, if not the Super Bowl again. Even with the loss of Josh Norman, I know that's going to be a blow. I know Josh Norman won them a game against New Orleans, and he played big in so many other games. I know that's going to be a big deal, but it's one player, and I would think that with Cam Newton, if you have to rely on that offense a little bit more than you used to, he's the guy that you can pin everything on. Especially because you'd think he'd gotten more mature about how to deal with losses, because you're going to have more of them this year, and how to grow from that. And that was his biggest issue on the Super Bowl, the way we saw him act. and everybody called him out for it or whatever. He's got to be less of a sore loser and more of a guy that says, okay, look, we lost. It's not the end of the world. Let's go. Move on to the next one. You know. But again, this is a team that if they don't, like, where do you, like, they have to at least make the playoffs, right? Like, if they don't at least make the divisional round, would you say that's a disappointment?
Honestly, I think
so.
if you're Carolina not making it back to the Super Bowl, you have to be extremely disappointed. Outside of Carolina, I see them making at least the NFC Championship game. Anything outside of that, I think, would be a down year for them.
What do you think, Gary?
I totally agree. I think that this is a team, like I said before, they are set for success. They really are. And I just have a hard time believing that if they didn't make it to the divisional round, they were a complete team. I think if this is the case, when we're sitting here, and when it comes playoff time and this team does not make it to the divisional round, I think that means there were some injuries. I think that means that Cam Newton's not playing. I think that means that they've had a slew of injuries on defense. I think that's the only way that takes place. If they keep healthy, they're a complete team. It would be just a catastrophic thing for them not to make it to the divisional round or even further.
Yeah. I mean, when you're that top team in that division, you're expected to be there again. It's hard not to say that you expect them to get in certain parts of the playoffs. It's just how it is. So we move on again now to going to Atlanta with Atlanta Falcons team manager for Last Word on Sports, Justin Halper, talking Falcons here. Hello, and I'm here with Last Word on Sports writer for the Atlanta Falcons, Justin Halper. You're actually the team manager. How are you doing?
Yeah, I am the team manager for the Atlanta Falcons on Last Word on Sports.
I mean, so, for people who don't, I mean, obviously right there, so I know what that is. But for people who don't understand what the team manager there does, kind of explain that a little bit.
So basically, one of the main roles for the team manager is to basically spread word of all the articles written by Last Word on Sports via social media and control the social media accounts for that team. So on Twitter, I control the Last Word on Sports Falcons account, and basically I share most of the Falcons articles that are written on Last Word on Sports.
All right, yeah, see, so if you become part, if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan out there and you're wanting to be a writer, that's who you go find on Twitter right there. So, Justin, the Falcons kind of got off to a big start, and then they sort of imploded towards the end.
Yeah.
What do you think that they did in the off season here, whether it's through the draft or, just kind of they did a little bit of mix and match. They brought back some players they used to have. They retained a lot of their players, and they brought in like a Mohamed Sanu and stuff like that. So
yeah, I really like this new signing because with obviously we cut ties with Roddy White in the off season, but then we excuse me, with the addition of Mohamed Sanu brings in a much younger number 2 receiving option. And then I think also we still have Justin Hardy. He was we got him in last year's draft. And I think that he has great upside as a potential number 2 and number 3 receiver. And also, of course, we drafted Keanu Neal in the first round. And I really think that he's going to help us out in our secondary a lot. And also, one thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing how Desmond Trufant plays. He was obviously a Pro Bowler last year, and I think he could definitely make the jump to perhaps being an all-pro player this year, and I'm really excited for how the defense is going to look this year.
All right, so what is it about that defense do you feel like Is do you like this move of Vic Beasley to linebacker and then signing a Dwight Freeney and a few other positions?
I really like the signing of Freeney because it brings in. I've actually wanted Freeney since he was a free agent before the Cardinals got him last year. Because he brings in just another solid pass rusher, and if Beasley plays linebacker more, that means that you have a solid linebacker core with Beasley. You have Paul Warlow. We just drafted Deion Jones, and really the defense is definitely the linebacker core looks really exciting. Warlow, obviously, he was undrafted, but he's shown a lot of promise throughout the years. He's the defense, Dan Quinn has really molded it into kind of like a grit and grind type of defense, which I really like seeing as a Falcons fan.
Are they going to be able to? Do they have somebody set already to kind of be the guy that really does help Desmond Trufant on the other side, corner-wise?
Well, at corner, we have Robert Alford still as our number 2 corner. And he's shown signs of he can be a solid starter. Keanu Neal, I think he's a pro-ready player. I think he showed flashes of really brilliance at Florida. And I think he's just going to be a very solid safety for us to have. Just our secondary is looking pretty solid. The linebacker core, Warlow, this will be, I believe, his 3rd year. So he has more experience now, and he's like one of the leaders of the linebacker core now. And Vic Beasley, he's going to be in his 2nd year. Now he's healthy. He doesn't have the shoulder injury anymore. So I really think that just overall, the defense is definitely going to be a lot better than it was last year. And I believe that. Excuse me. I believe that definitely the defense is going to be one of the keys to winning more games down the stretch this year.
Oh, certainly. I mean, having a better defense makes it to where Matt Ryan and that offense can have the ball more. And you discussed the getting rid of Roddy White and having Sanu. I mean, how did you necessarily feel about that? Like, Roddy White didn't have the greatest of year last year, and so he was around complaining a lot, and he was not very happy about how he was kind of just cut from the team the way he was. How do you feel about that? Do you think that they went about it the right way? Did Roddy have a point, or was he just complaining?
I feel like when it came down to it, it was a business decision to get rid of Roddy White, and that's really all it was. I mean, obviously, he's done so much for the Falcons organization over the years. He's been really a leader, a mentor, but, obviously one of the best receivers in Falcons history. But when it comes down to it, he was just not as productive anymore. And they needed to bring in newer, younger guys. They needed to free up the cap space to get a guy like Sanu, who they signed him for 5 years. That's 5 years of having more productive receiver. 5 years of just more promising down the stretch. Basically, when it came down to it, it was really short-term over long-term, really. Or long-term was being prioritized over the short-term. As in, getting a guy like Sanu, who is going to be around, he's going to be developing long-term, compared to having a guy like Roddy White, who is likely only going to be slightly productive for the next 1 or 2 years at best.
Do you think that Sanu can sort of develop into a true number 2 there to Julio, or is it going to be more of a sort of committee approach there with the rest of the guys that are in that receiver core?
I believe that, Julio, obviously, he's a bona fide superstar in the NFL. With Mohamed Sanu, I think he has potential to develop into a solid number 2 receiver. And so does, as I mentioned earlier, Justin Hardy. I feel like he definitely has the potential to be a second or third option in the offense. And even if neither of them develops into a solid number 2 receiver. I still think that we drafted Austin Hooper this year to be hopefully our starting tight end, and I think that he has a lot of potential. He showed a lot of promise at Stanford, and I feel like even if we don't have a true number 2 receiver, Hooper should be pretty reliable, just like Tony Gonzalez was when he was on the Falcons. Like, tight ends were always very heavily involved in the offense. So having a guy like Hooper heavily involved should really help with his development and also help the offense flow a lot more easily.
I mean, so, there's been talk in the offseason about the running back situation with Devonta Freeman picking up for Coleman last year and having the big year he had. And then this year it seems like there's been talk of Freeman sort of reverting to a lesser role and having Coleman take up more of the snaps. Is that sort of the case, or?
Right now, I believe that Freeman is still going to enter the year as a starter, but further down the road, I believe that Coleman could end up stealing more and more snaps from him. One thing that really kept, after his injury, what kept Tevin Coleman in more of a reserve role was his fumbling issues. And the fumbling issues are really what kept him on the bench and kept him from regaining that starting role. Because while Freeman was racking up all the touchdowns and he piled up over 1,000 yards, but Coleman, he showed flashes of being a big play threat and having that type of capability. But really, when it came down to it, his fumbling issues are what kept him as a reserve. And if he can cut down on the fumbling and maintain that big play capability that he displayed in his rookie year and that he displayed throughout his years at Indiana, I think that he could definitely pose a legitimate threat to overcome Freeman as the starter.
All right, so let's look at coming into this year. The Falcons are about to start their first preseason game, like right now. But looking at the schedule that you have and the division and everything. Whoops. Hold on. Something decided to. I don't think y'all are hearing that, but in my ears, something just decided to turn on randomly. But looking at the schedule that you have, what are sort of your expectations for the team this year?
When it comes down to it, I do believe that we have a fairly difficult schedule. I mean, we go against teams like the Chiefs, the Packers, the Seahawks, even the Broncos, who, while they don't have Peyton and lost a few key pieces on their defense, they're still going to be a playoff contender, I believe. And just several playoff teams that they're going to be going against, plus the whole division as a whole is going to be a lot better this year, I believe. The Buccaneers, it's Winston's second year. He's only improving. The Saints, their defense is getting slightly better. Their offense, they added some key pieces in the draft. And the Panthers, of course, they were in the Super Bowl last year to get back Kelvin Benjamin this year. So, while the Falcons did go 500 last year, I'd say probably they go maybe a similar record to that, but I feel like they take some steps forward on the defensive end. Matt Ryan has more of a bounce back year, but even with all that, they could be in contention for a playoff spot, but it's very unlikely that they end up with a much better record than last year. But they're going to make strides overall. Just it won't pay out in terms of wins and losses.
So where do you think the division does fall here? What are your thoughts of a 1-4 for the NFC South?
I say one is going to be the Panthers. They have Kelvin Benjamin back. Cam Newton's only getting better, more experienced. He has the playoff experience. He has a chip on his shoulder. The defense, even with the loss of Josh Norman, I feel like they're definitely, excuse me, they're definitely, like even without Josh Norman, I feel like now they have a chip on their shoulder as a defensive unit, like to pick up in the slack and show, hey, even without Josh Norman, we can still be, seeing a good defense. I mean, they still have Luke Kuechly. He's one of the best linebackers in the NFL. And all those players. Second, I see the Buccaneers coming in second. Another year of Jameis Winston. He's developing better chemistry with players like Mike Evans. Vincent Jackson are still there. Austin Seferian-Jenkins, that's a tight end. I see him getting a much larger role in the offense, and if he stays healthy, I can see him being like a potential Pro Bowler this year. He showed some like solid upside last year. And their defense, even though they lost Alton Werner, they added Brent Grimes, so their defense has improved, and I just feel like they're going to be a very solid team. Third, I see the Falcons. We already mentioned how their defense has improved, their offense has improved, and just overall they're like going to make strides from last year. And in last place, I see the Saints, because although their defense is slightly improved, and although they added players like Michael Thomas through the draft and guys like that, Drew Brees is getting up there in age. He's losing some of his arm strength. He's still going to be very accurate. He's still going to be a Pro Bowl quarterback, but I just don't see him being able to lead the Saints to a very ultra successful season this year.
All right, so what do you think? You kind of gave me sort of what you think the Falcons are going to do, but what's a best case and worst case scenario for the Falcons?
I'd say best case scenario, Matt Ryan has a solid bounce back year. Devontae Freeman or Kevin Coleman, either one of them have solid years. Julio Jones remains Julio Jones, like he remains like he was last year. The defense takes some strides, and best case scenario, I see them finishing at 10-6. And worst case scenario, Matt Ryan continues to decline. Devontae Freeman takes a step back. Excuse me. Kevin Coleman continues with his fumbling issues. Sanu and Hardy really have a tough time adjusting to being a more reliable option. Excuse me. And the defense doesn't really take that many strides, and Keanu Neal struggles in his rookie year more so. And I'd say worst case they finish at 7-9.
All right. Matt Ryan, I mean, he's kind of been up and down throughout his, career. What Matt Ryan do you think you're getting this season? Do you really feel that with the cast around him, he's going to have a better year?
I feel like he's certainly going to have a much better year, especially because you add in Austin Hooper to the offense. You add in Justin Hardy with more experience, Mohamed Sanu. The offensive line is getting better. Devontae Freeman, he's more established. Kevin Coleman, he's in his second year. Hopefully, he could be better this year. He cuts down on his fumbling, and he's a very solid running back. Another change of pace option. And really, when it comes down to it, I think Matt Ryan could end up being the Pro Bowl Matt Ryan, not last year's Matt Ryan. Like, I could see if his confidence is where it needs to be, and he's trusting his passes, trusting his reads, and all that. I can't see him having a worse year than last year. I can only see it being much better.
All right. Well, you kind of covered everything here for us, Justin. So I want to say thank you for helping us out.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that was I was pressing the button. The thing did not want to go up. So that was Justin Halper talking to Atlanta Falcons there. The Atlanta Falcons are kind of a tricky situation because they sort of have everything you'd think in a team that's going to go somewhere, except for you don't know who's going to be that sort of second receiver. And the defense, even though they've added a lot of pieces, are they going to be able to mesh?
Yeah, that's my biggest thing as well. You know, getting this offense to be what it could be is going to be the biggest question. And I think they have potential here. I really do. But, I mean, you lost a guy that was with you for a long time in Roddy White, which is not that he was producing a lot for them last year, but before that he was a big producer. And then now you've got the running back situation where, you know, you got Coleman and, of course, you got Devontae Freeman. Both can take carries, and Freeman, was a big surprise in a way, to come in and showcase that, hey, he could be the top guy. So saying that, you've got some good pieces, and then you throw in the thought process of what's Matt Ryan? Who is he? Is he going to be the guy that first got onto the scene and everybody was looking at as Matty Ice? Or is this going to be the guy that is lost, is kind of, unbalanced? Which guy are you getting? So there's so many different question marks on offense. That concerns me a lot. The defense almost throws me into a bigger loop because I think some of the changes there were okay, and I could see some potential. But I think that defense worries me more than a little bit than that offense does. So as much as I think that they could actually be a good team, I think the question marks make me a little bit reserved about them.
Yeah, I'm very worried about them. I think they overperformed last year by starting, 6-1, and before falling off the cliff. I think you see more of the second half of the season than you do the first. I think they kind of have people with too high of expectations because, they go last year and they go, well, we were 8-8 and we were about the same, so we might finish there this year. I don't know. I just can't see it. I'm not high on this team at all. I know Devontae Freeman was that big breakout star last year, but can he really produce the same this year? How is Matt Ryan? We heard in that interview he kept talking about, his confidence level, and if his confidence level was high, well, I don't want a quarterback that can get shaken up as much as it seemed Matt Ryan did. I mean, his numbers were great, but he could only do so much with what was around him. So I'm looking more of them near the bottom of this division, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they are at the end of the year. I mean, they got some questions, and it starts right at the top, like you mentioned, with Matt Ryan. Are we going to get the older Matt Ryan? And look, let's be honest here. Even though he was having those killer numbers, he still wasn't really winning them the important games. He was still being outperformed by other quarterbacks in those situations. And, I just worry about the Falcons trying to make it up to that 8-8 again. That's going to be a challenge, I think, for them, not just with this division, but also with the schedule that they have. So, last but not least, we have the Tampa Bay Bucs being previewed by Dalton Tompkins of Last Word on Sports as well. Here we go. Hello, and I am here with Dalton Tompkins, Last Word on Sports writer for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How are you doing today, man?
I'm hanging in there, Sean. How you doing?
Doing all right. Glad you were able to make it off work in time. So, the Bucs I think they're in the middle of their first preseason game right now. But, going back to the off season and the draft and everything, did you like what they did there?
Yeah, I think we had talked last, and I was really hoping that they would do more with the offensive line. But from the sounds of it, the way camp's been going, they're somewhat content with the way that their line's shaped up. But I've been really pleased with how they added Brent Grimes in free agency and drafted Vernon Hargraves. I feel like that really shores up their secondary for at least the next 2 years. But I think that their defense is going to be sneaky good this year.
Yeah, I mean, they added Noah Spence as well, a guy that had some issues, off the field or whatever, but, he's still a very, very good defensive end, and, still adding some more to that defense as well in the draft. So, got to be happy at least that they know where the problem was and they addressed it, right?
Oh, definitely. And Noah Spence, he's very versatile as far as an athlete on the field. He can do it all. He's got a repertoire of moves that the defensive coaches in Tampa Bay, they just love, and they rave about him ever since camp opened. But like you said, their game tonight, I've already seen a nice 26-yard touchdown from Winston to Russell Shepard. And it's just been really nice to see him kind of get back in the flow of things and see how camp's been treating them.
I mean, so this being your team, when you're sitting here second round, they're taking a kicker. What are you thinking?
Honestly, it was definitely a facepalm moment for me, but I understand the idea and the thought of, if we take this kid and he turns out to be what he's supposed to be as far as a prodigy in the kicking game, I think that it really could shore up their special teams for a long time to come. But, of course, right on cue, he's already missed an extra point in their first preseason game, but I'm sure that's something they'll get figured out since the extra point's been moved back. It's something he'll adjust to.
I mean, this is now Jameis Winston's second year. People have been talking about how he's gotten in shape, lost some weight. He did really great for having a rookie season last year. I mean, how are they looking for him to improve this year? What are you looking to see out of him?
I think that really having Doug Martin be one of the top running backs in the league last year took a lot of pressure off of Jameis's shoulders. And I think you could definitely tell as the season went along, you could just tell in his poise and some of his throws had that extra umph on them. And it was like he knew where he wanted to go with the ball, especially towards the end of the season. And I think that getting the late addition to the Pro Bowl and all that, it doesn't mean much for these guys, but for him being a rookie quarterback and getting that recognition, I think that the sky's the limit for this kid. And I think that 4,500 yards passing and maybe 30 touchdowns, if not a couple more than that, those are both realistic goals for him in his second year.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, and they also did a lot of, screen passes with Charles Sims and everything, so that could rack up those yards. And you talked about the defense being sneaky good. Man, this wide receiver core, if everybody stays healthy, could be sneaky good. You got
Definitely. And Vincent Jackson being the seasoned veteran that he is, I think he has the ability now towards the end stages, the twilight of his career, if you will. I think he has the ability now to rub off some for these younger guys. And like I said earlier, Russell Shepard, young kid, Kenny Bell is someone to keep an eye on. He's the second-year player out in Nebraska. He missed all last year on IR, but he's going to be their starting kick returner and possibly their fourth receiver. And by season's end, he might be a household name just because he's got that much talent.
Wow, that's a lot to think of. That's not even counting, a guy that kind of sprung on for them but then got hurt in Dante Dye and Adam Humphries. They kind of like to use him as sort of that sneaky slot guy. So, man, just so many packages that have they talked about that? Like, they be using a 5 or different, like, really spread packages for Winston?
I haven't heard a whole lot about that particularly, but I have read a few reports saying that Winston's comfortability in those packages, spread, 4 receivers and everything like that, has gotten a lot better just from the end of last season until training camp now. And you can definitely see in the work ethic that he's put in and the weight that he's shed off, and he's just in a lot better place physically, that it's something that the rest of the team sees that their leader is doing. And I think that you might actually see a lot more 4 or 5 wide receiver sets in Tampa Bay this year just because Dirk Cutter has that level of trust in Jameis Winston. And it'll be interesting to see how he responds, because if they start doing that kind of thing early on in the season and Jameis starts racking up crazy numbers, like I said earlier, who knows what the limit on this kid is? They could just let him loose at that point.
Yeah, I mean, another guy could help him with that. A guy that had injury issues last year, but he was sort of counted on various times, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, to be that tight end number 1. I mean, do you think that he can really sort of blossom this year, obviously staying healthy?
Yeah, he has every opportunity, Sean, and what's going to be interesting to see is how he responds from the head coach actually relegating him down to second string in the offseason program. During OTAs, he was kind of slow in his work ethic and workouts, and you could tell he actually put on a few pounds since the end of the season due to injury or whatever the excuse was. The coaches weren't happy with him in the offseason, and so they actually moved Cameron Brate up on the depth chart. So it'll be nice to see Seferian-Jenkins kind of bounce back from that and reclaim his starting role. But I'm with you. I think once he does, he's just such an imposing physical beast out there, to throw along with Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson. You have 3 guys right there, 6'5" and over, that can just go up and absolutely get the ball in the middle of the field. So I think that there's a lot of good things to see from him if he can just take that next step along with Jameis.
Well, I mean, a month from today, the season starts, and you're looking at this schedule here for the Bucs. I mean, what are you expecting from the Bucs this year? I mean, last year they were kind of that team that, okay, they're under the radar. Wonder if Jameis Winston's going to be the guy we're all saying he is. This year it seems like they could be that surprise team you got to worry about.
I agree, and I still think we'll find out a lot about Tampa Bay the first 5 weeks of the season. Their schedule early on is absolutely brutal. They start out at Atlanta. That's always a tough game. Division rival games are unpredictable to a fault in the NFL. But after that, they go immediately on the road the next week to Arizona, which is going to be a tough game for the Buccaneers. And that'll be a real measuring stick for them to see kind of where they stand. But then after that, the next 3 games are Rams, Broncos, and Panthers. So it's not going to get any easier for Jameis Winston and company early in the season. But once they get past that tough schedule, that tough early season schedule, their schedule lightens up. And towards the end of their season, it looks fairly decent for them. So if they can just kind of round into form and going into October, I think that they'll be in good shape.
And where are you expecting them record-wise, you think?
I've tried to draw up their actual schedule and put numbers and see how the games will play out several different times. And I always come back to 8-8 or 9-7. And the optimist in me wants to say 9-7 or 10-6, but I just can't find that 10th win. It's going to be really tough. They're going to have to sneak one out somewhere, either on the road in New Orleans or at Dallas. And those aren't easy places to play by any means. And Dallas is a total crapshoot. So we'll definitely see towards the end of the season if they can keep their heads on straight. 10-6 is achievable, but in the NFC, it's such a wild conference to really play and try to make the playoffs year in, year out.
What do you think is sort of a worst case that you see them doing?
Oh, man. I was hoping you wouldn't bring this up because I've thought about that plenty as well. Tampa, they've really, like I started saying earlier, Doug Martin, what he was able to do last year for them opened up their offense and allowed a rookie quarterback to show his growth and maturity towards the end of the season especially. So I think losing Doug Martin and even Mike Evans, those would both be catastrophic blows to this offense. But at the same time, on defense, you flip the script, you lose Levante David or Gerald McCoy, and those are 2 key cogs on defense as well. I think as far as injuries goes, those are the guys I'm looking for that they absolutely can't get hurt and miss any time if the Bucs have big plans in 2016.
So, I mean, looking at the rest of this division, where are you seeing? So, I mean, obviously, I think we all kind of know the Panthers should sort of do the same thing they did last year, but where are you seeing the Falcons? Where are you seeing the Saints?
It's such a hard conference to read on, the NFC is, and especially the NFC South. I've heard several reporters refer to it as one of the, if not the toughest division in football this year, just because Carolina is expected to do big things again. But New Orleans and Atlanta are both heavy question marks, just because New Orleans on defense, and we all saw the games they played last year, anyone who came into the Superdome in New Orleans, it was going to be a shootout on that defense. And the same thing with Atlanta to an extent. Their defense was, I think, middle of the pack. Towards the end of the season, they kind of fell apart. But Atlanta's offensive line and Julio Jones and Matt Ryan and the emergence of Devontae Freeman and the possibility of having two stud running backs there in Atlanta, I think they're a little bit more of a scary team to contend with out of the South. And it might just be the Saints hate in me, but I just don't think that Drew Brees can hold together a patchwork offense like he did last year and keep putting up the numbers for very much longer. I think that this might be the year that Drew Brees kind of takes a step backwards in his regression. And I'm probably the only one predicting that, but I just think that at some point, Father Time catches up with all of us, and this could be his year.
So where do you see it, 1 through 4, the final standings for that division?
Well, if you got to put me on the spot, I'm going to say Carolina, somewhere in the range of 11 to 13 wins. They'll definitely be the one. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'll say Tampa Bay wins 10 games and gets the second spot in the NFC South, maybe a wild card depending on how the rest of the conference shakes up. And then after that, I'll say Atlanta third and New Orleans fourth in the division.
All right, Dalton, you answered all of our questions here, man. Want to say thank you for helping us out on the short notice. But, yeah, man, during the season we'll be looking to use you guys a lot more than we did last year. So hopefully, a big Tampa Bay game comes along. I can, especially, that Tampa Bay Dallas game late in the season. We got to get that going.
Yeah, believe me, that'll be fun. I'll be looking forward to it all season, Sean, and I'm here for you whenever you need me, man.
All right. Well, I forgot that one kind of cuts off there. But, yeah, that was Dalton Tompkins talking Tampa Bay. Honestly, this is my team that I think might be a little bit sneaky. And I think last year people were saying, sort of okay, I think they're going to do sort of bad. You might have a couple people that were saying, watch out for them. But this year, if things sort of pan out like last year with the running game, with another year of having the receiver core there with Winston, and I think the defense was getting better, I think watch out for them to be second. What are you guys thinking?
I'll let Gary go first because I don't think I'm going to agree with either of you.
Oh, wow. You know what? I think that they're a team that has a chance to do what Sean said here, and that's be sneaky. I do look at them as a team that is growing, and they are, starting to maybe meet what their expectations are to an extent. Now, I know all the expectations are Super Bowl, but what I mean by expectations is that we have a young quarterback who's a year older, who's understanding the system completely. And Winston, I think the situation when it comes to receiver is really well placed for him. I think it's complete. The defense has definitely got some pieces that I think work for it, and it could give them a chance to compete with almost anybody in this division. So, saying all that, I mean, I definitely don't put them above the Panthers. I don't think that they're going to be a spot. I think they're going to be battling it out for that number 2 spot. I really do. I don't them at the bottom of the division. I just think that they've too many good players in place right now to be there.
Nah, see, I might be very down on them. I think the defense is still going to be great, and yes, the offense is going to improve a bit, but I just can't see it. Getting rid of Lovie Smith, I still don't understand that move, and I think they kind of regress a little bit here instead of taking that big step forward. Like I keep hearing a lot of people say, I think they'll be mixing it around with Atlanta for that last spot. I can't see Doug Martin repeating what he's done the last couple of years. We'll still see on Winston. I still think he's growing. I still think he's a couple years away from really showing his true potential in the league. They're going to win some games. I'm not going to say they're going to be battling out for like the number one pick or anything. I'm still looking at like a 6-10 kind of a season for Tampa Bay, but that sneaky team, I just can't see it with them. And I understand that they're kind of that sexy, trendy pick, kind of like me in Jacksonville, and I can respect it from a talent standpoint, but just with a lot of the changes they have going into the coaching staff, I just think they're still a year away.
And trust me, I'm a Lovie Smith fan. I mean, he is a Texas guy, so it's hard to go against a guy from Big Sandy. But, you know, the way it works for me, once again, I guess I'm basing it probably more off last year. And I guess you really can't do that because it is a different system, coaches and all that. I guess I'm just kind of going off of what I feel talent-wise, you know. But, I mean, you make some good points.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard because that's what you are doing right now, is you're going off of paper. And to me, on paper, this team should do better. Taking out Lovie Smith, yeah, but that offense was actually pretty good last year. They added pieces to make the defense better, which was their Achilles heel, and I think the offensive line is going to be okay, improved from last year as well. So for me, I'm going to say that we might as well go ahead and get into our final standings here. For me, I've got the Panthers around the 13-3 mark. I've got the Buccaneers for me at 9-7, and I think Saints 8-8, and the Falcons are going to be either 8-8 or 7-9 with them right there.
Yeah, I'll go Carolina 1. I think that's where all of us would go. I'll say 13-3. I think that's a safe bet. I like New Orleans this year. I think they still have a bit in them. Can they make the playoffs? I'm not quite sure. Let's go 9-7 there, and then how about 6-10 for both Atlanta and Tampa Bay? And I'll give Atlanta the edge as being the third team.
All right, and you know, it's going to be a hat trick when it comes to, you know, the top team here, which is Carolina. I'm going to go 12-4. I think, you know, somebody will find a way to surprise them and beat them. I think one of the other wins, or maybe two of the other wins against this team, will probably be divisional. Just because it's a divisional opponent, I think that's an exercise in probably good judgment. Looking at, you know, number 2 here, I think I am going to have to go with Tampa Bay, and I know from all Randy said, I still kind of think that these guys still can maybe, you know, make some strides down the line. I don't know how many they're going to have, but I will say 9-7. I think it's going to be a tough task ahead of them. And of course, the New Orleans Saints. I think that these guys are good, but I don't think that they're going to last. I think they're 1 or 2 injuries away from not being a good team. So I look at them, and I'm going to have to put them in I'll put them at 7-9. And the Falcons, I just don't have much hope for them. I wish I did, but I just don't. 6-10 for me.
All right. So there you go. There you have it, our standings. All right, that'll do it for the NFC South. Next week on the Friday morning show, we'll be doing the NFC North, and then we'll just have one more division to do. Gary, our Cowboys are fast approaching on that NFC East, but we got to get through the Packers, Lions, Vikings, and Bears first. And NFC North should be interesting. We do have people for all of those, so. But yeah, until we get to that next week, enjoy those preseason games. We will be back on the Tuesday doing college football Big 12 talk. And we will also be doing our first sort of look back at games, preseason-wise, and kind of just talking about some damn football games that have actually happened. That is what I'm going to be excited about, as I'm sure all of us will. So, all right, until we see you on the Tuesday show, later, everybody.